On the evening of October 10, 2003, in Kenya's Samburu National Reserve, researchers found an elephant named Eleanor with a swollen trunk dragging along the ground, cuts on one ear and a leg, and a broken tusk they thought had happened in an earlier fall. 7 minutes later, she went down heavily and did not get up again. Within the hour, another elephant from a family she did not belong to was standing over her, working her own tusks underneath Eleanor's body, trying to lift her back onto her feet. Eleanor never stood again. She died the next morning at a collapsed. Over the following days, several more elephants came to the body. One sniffed it, touched it, tasted it with her trunk, and pulled at it with her foot. Another, Eleanor's probable daughter, spent 7 straight hours in the vicinity of the body, coming as close as 10 meters. This episode is not about whether an elephant or any animal can grieve. That much is treated as close to settled in the popular imagination already. Dogs are said to mourn an owner. Elephants are said to weep. Cats are reported to search a house for a companion that will not come back. The harder question, the one comparative psychologists have only recently found a rigorous way to isolate, is a different one. It is not whether an animal feels something when another animal dies. It is whether the animal understands in any working sense what death actually is. Those two questions, it turns out, do not have to arrive together, and pulling them apart changes what counts as evidence. The elephant who tried to lift Eleanor was a matriarch named Grace, leading a family called the Virtues, unrelated to Eleanor's own family, the First Ladies. A second visitor, Maui, from a family called the Hawaiian Islands, was the one who sniffed, tasted, and pulled at the body. Researchers who track elephant social bonds over years had a precise number for how close Eleanor actually was to everyone who showed up. Her own family scored between 0.61 and 0.89 on that association scale, the kind of figure that only comes from decades spent moving together. Grace and Maui scored between 0.04 and 0.1. By the elephant's own social bookkeeping, these were near strangers. The team that ran this study, publishing in 2006 in the journal Applied Animal Behavior Science, stated their conclusion without much hedging. Elephants show a generalized response to the suffering and death. Their broader conclusion covers more ground than the moment of death alone. In their own words again, the conclusion must be that elephants are interested in the sick, dying, or dead elephants irrespective of genetic relationship. Whatever this response actually is, it does not wait for death to arrive before it starts. None of that by itself settles much about what an elephant understands. Touching a body, sniffing it, trying to raise it back onto its feet, all of it is also consistent with heightened social alarm at an unresponsive herd member, or plain investigative interest in something unusual on the ground. Interest is not the same instrument as understanding. To press the harder question, it helps to look at a second species entirely, one where researchers happen to be recording at the exact moment death occurred. In 2010, researchers from the University of Stirling published an account, in the journal Current Biology, of the death of Pansy, an elderly female chimpanzee living out her final days inside her own social group at a safari park in Scotland. In the day or two before she died, the group changed its own routine around her. Other chimpanzees groomed her more, and in the researchers' own words, they nested near her in the day. At the moment she stopped breathing, one of the group, a chimpanzee named Chippy, was recorded crouching over Pansy's head, appearing to try to open her mouth, behavior the researchers described as close inspection and testing for signs of life. Pansy's daughter, Rosie, then did something the researchers had not recorded from her once across 29 prior nights of observation. She stayed beside her mother's body for almost the entire night, on a section of the sleeping platform she had never used before. The following morning, other members of the group pulled straw off the body. Then the group's routine changed again, in a way that is harder to wave off as coincidence. That specific platform, the one where Pansy died, had been used for nesting on every single night of the 29-night study up to that point. For the 5 nights immediately after her death, nobody nested there, not a different platform, avoided out of some general new caution. That one. So what do these observations actually license? An unrelated matriarch working her tusks under a body, a chimpanzee testing a dead group mate's mouth, one sleeping spot going empty for 5 nights running. For a long time, close to out of reach for an unhuman mind, bundled up with abstract reasoning about mortality as a general fact of existence. A 2021 paper in the journal Synthes by the researchers Monso and Asuna Mascaro argues that this assumption has been doing more work than it has earned, on both ends of the problem. It has made the concept sound more intellectually demanding than it needs to be, and it has made grief look like the only acceptable evidence that an animal has grasped it at all. Their proposed alternative is a minimal concept of death, and it asks for far less than a philosophy of mortality. An animal holds it if it reliably treats one specific individual as dead, where dead means three things held together. That individual was expected to have the ordinary functions of a living creature, moving, responding, breathing. Those functions are now absent, and they are not coming back. Put in plainer terms, an animal does not need a worldview about mortality in general. It needs to notice that this particular body, which used to move and respond, no longer does and is not going to again. Grasping that, the authors argue, does not require anything exotic. In their own phrasing, it can be reached through first-order thinking, the same basic cognitive toolkit a great many species already use to track ordinary changes in their environment, no different in kind from noticing that a food source has run out for good. The second half of the argument is the part that actually reorganizes the question this episode opened with. The concept of death and grief, they argue, do not require each other. Grief does not necessarily signal a concept of death, they write. What it signals is a strong emotional attachment to the dead individual. It runs the other direction too. Understanding that an individual has died does not necessarily imply an animal could display every visible sign of distress with no working sense that a companion is permanently gone. A different animal could quietly register that permanence with no visible distress at all. Grief and understanding are not the same instrument, and a species could plausibly carry one without the other in either direction. Looked at through that lens, Eleanor's visitors and Pansy's group were both doing something more specific than generic mourning or generic curiosity. Chippy's check at Pansy's mouth reads as close to exactly what the minimal concept describes. Present. The 5-night gap at one particular platform reads as an updated expectation about one particular place, not a blanket new fear of night platforms as a category. Neither observation proves that a chimpanzee or an elephant carries an abstract theory of mortality the way an adult human does. Under the minimal definition on offer here, it does not have to. It is worth pausing on how different these two animals are. Elephants and chimpanzees split onto separate evolutionary paths tens of millions of years before either lineage looked anything like it does now. In behavior toward one specific place or one specific body. It is not something the two species could plausibly have inherited from any shared recent ancestor built for the purpose. It looks more like two very different nervous systems arriving at a similar minimal solution on their own. Researchers studying this area now have a name for the whole subject: comparative thanatology. It remains a young field, built mostly out of exactly this kind of case: one animal, one death, one carefully documented account, rather than large surveys across many individuals. The same low bar likely applies closer to home than most people find comfortable to admit. Checking a body for a pulse before believing what is already obvious. A reluctance to walk back into the specific room, the specific chair, the specific stretch of hallway where someone died, long after any reason fear has an argument left to stand on. Neither habit waits for a person to first work out a philosophy of mortality. Both look like the same minimal machinery, running on much older, shared hardware, not a separate overlay that arrived only once language and reflection did. None of this settles what an elephant or a chimpanzee actually experiences when a companion dies, and nothing here is offered as a final word on animal grief specifically. It is a narrower claim than that. Recognizing death at some minimal level may not require the sophisticated machinery researchers spent decades assuming it needed, and the behavior on record from a reserve in northern Kenya to a safari park in Scotland fits comfortably under that lower bar. Here is the question for the comments. Think of one specific place, not a general category, that still changes how you act because of what happened there once. What is it, and how long has it been? I read these. In the next episode, we stay on this same edge between what a body does on its own and what a mind actually registers, and turn to a feeling every mammal alive seems to share: fear.